Claire McKinney liked mornings like this, still, pale, and quiet enough that the only sound came from her boots crunching over gravel. She parked her city-issued white utility truck beside Riverside's northern Siren Tower, a tall steel structure that loomed over the neighborhood like a watchful sentinel. The early light made its surface gleam faintly, and for a moment she just stood there, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, letting the calm seep in before the day's noise. She was here to run a scheduled test, one of dozens she'd conducted over her 5 years in the county's emergency management department. It was routine, predictable, comfortably dull, most days. Setting her coffee on the truck's hood, she reached into the bed for her black equipment case. Inside, a ruggedized laptop, a signal strength meter, a spare headset, and her handheld recorder. Claire had learned long ago to keep her own backups. Technology failed, and sometimes the official logs were missing things. Not often, but enough times to make her cautious. She climbed the narrow service ladder to the control panel mounted. Halfway up the pole, locking her harness to the rail. A soft wind tugged at her hair as she clipped the laptop into the panel's diagnostic port. The sirens were the city's lifeline during wildfires, flash floods, and the rare inland tornado massive speakers capable of cutting through chaos with pure, unignorable sound. This particular tower had just received a new software upgrade, supposedly to improve broadcast clarity. "All right," she murmured into her headset. "Commencing test sequence, Tower 19, Northern Sector." Her colleague Gary's voice came faintly from the operations center miles away. "Copy that." Claire, standing by. She typed in the authorization code, fingers tapping from muscle memory. The signal strength meter flashed green. She switched to her handheld recorder, pressing the red button. A habit. She liked having an independent capture of the test, something separate from the official network's feed. The first tone blared. Out across the rooftops, a rising wail, steady and piercing. Dogs barked somewhere in the distance. Birds scattered from a power line. She waited for the tone to finish, then keyed in the second sequence, which should produce nothing but static, followed by a confirmation beep. Only that's not what happened. Halfway through the static, a man's voice slid into her ears. Calm, low, almost conversational. "Welcome back, Reaper Origin." Her pulse stumbled. She froze, every muscle locking up. The wind suddenly felt colder. "Gary, did you hear that?" she asked into her headset. "Hear what?" he replied. His tone was bored, distracted, probably. Flipping through paperwork. The voice. It said she stopped herself. Never mind, running the third tone. She completed the sequence mechanically, her fingers stiff on the keys. The test ended. Gary signed off. "Logs look clean. Good to go. See you back at base." But the logs couldn't be right. She knew what she'd heard. She unhooked her harness, climbed down, and walked back to the truck with deliberate calm, like moving too fast would somehow draw attention. The street was still quiet. No one loitered nearby. Just her and the tower and the low hum of distant traffic. In the truck cab, she rewound the handheld recorder and pressed play. First tone clear, static normal. And then, as distinctly as if he were sitting beside her, that same voice again. "Welcome back, Reaper Origin." She hit pause. The words hung in the air like smoke. The name scratched at something buried deep in her memory. She hadn't heard it in years, not since a night long ago, at a remote coastal outpost when she'd been called in for an equipment calibration job that turned out to be anything but. That night, she'd been in a small communications room, rerouting cables, when a group of men in unmarked uniforms passed by the open doorway. She'd caught fragments of their conversation operational. Phrases, code names, and one of them had said, "Reaper Origin," in that same measured tone. Minutes later, two of the men had stepped into the room, asked her what she'd heard. She'd said nothing, but they'd escorted her outside anyway, into the cold wind off the ocean. No explanation, no paperwork, just a warning in their eyes. She'd told herself it was nothing, that she'd misheard. Now, in the cab of her truck, staring at the blinking recorder, she knew better. Her first instinct was to call Gary back and demand to check the raw frequency logs. But something stopped her. If the voice wasn't on the official recording, if only her handheld had picked it up, and this was already off the books, and bringing it up might mark her in ways she didn't want. She glanced at the tower in her rearview mirror. Its silhouette against the pale morning looked different, now less like a sentinel, more like a spy. For the rest of the drive back to headquarters, her mind replayed the phrase, "Welcome back." Welcome back to what? By the time she parked, her coffee was cold, her palms damp. She left the recorder in her pocket, as if keeping it close might keep her safe. But as she walked through the glass doors of the operations center, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was already watching her. And not from inside the building, from somewhere higher. Somewhere wired into the same network she thought she understood. Somewhere that knew exactly who she was and was ready to remind her. Claire didn't mention the voice during her walk through the operations center lobby. She swiped her ID badge, passed security, and stepped into the heart of the room. A cluster of desks and wall-sized monitors streaming real-time weather data, emergency alerts, and system status maps. The low hum of machines mixed with the murmur of coworkers talking about lunch plans and equipment repairs. Gary was leaning back in his chair, eating pretzels out of a paper bag. "Hey, McKinney." "Tower. 19 tested clean. Smooth work." Claire forced a smile. "Glad to hear it. Mind pulling the raw audio from the test?" Gary frowned mid-chew. "Why? You just said it went fine." "Just want to make sure the upgrade didn't cause any signal distortion," she lied. He shrugged, turned to his keyboard, and tapped through the system. A moment later, the tower's playback file filled one of the monitors. The familiar wail echoed from the speakers. Static hissed. A confirmation beep followed. No voice. "See?" Gary said, grinning. "Perfect." Claire's skin prickled. "That's exactly what you heard." "Yep, that's what the tower sent to every connected receiver. No anomalies." "You good?" She hesitated. The words "Welcome back, Reaper Origin" hovered on the tip of her tongue, but she bit them back. If she told him, what would happen? Next, a report, questions, maybe worse laughter. She'd be the technician who heard phantom voices on a Tuesday morning. Instead, she nodded. "Yeah, just being thorough." Gary returned to his pretzels. She left the desk and walked briskly toward the equipment storage room. Inside, she shut the door and pulled out her handheld recorder. She pressed play. First tone, static, and there it was again, calm, deliberate, unmistakable. "Welcome back, Reaper Origin." She rewound, played it again, and again. Each time, her heartbeat climbed. She remembered that coastal outpost years ago, the dim room, the green glow of radios, the smell of wet metal. She'd been working contract maintenance for the state, swapping out a faulty antenna coupler when she overheard the phrase. It wasn't just the words that stuck with her, but the way they were said. The same measured cadence. Back then, the incident ended with her standing in the cold night air, escorted to her truck by men who never gave names. She'd driven away, told herself to forget it, and never spoke of it again. Until now, when the voice had found her. Claire slipped the recorder back into her pocket and checked her phone. No missed calls, no strange messages. But her stomach told her that someone was already aware she'd heard it. She spent the next hour doing busy work checking weather sensors, updating maintenance logs, while her mind kept circling the same question. If it wasn't in the official system log, then where had it come from? There were only two possibilities. 1. Someone had hijacked the signal, breaking into the emergency network with military-grade precision, targeting her specifically. 2. The voice was coming from a parallel channel 1, not monitored or recorded by county equipment. Both possibilities were bad. At lunch, she left the building, bypassing the food trucks in the parking lot, and walked 2 blocks to a little coffee shop tucked between a thrift store and a boarded-up bookstore. She ordered black coffee, grabbed a table in the corner, and opened her laptop. The public internet was no place to search for Reaper origin. Even a trace could put her on someone's radar. But she knew how to sift through sanitized government records, the ones no one bothered to scrub entirely. She started with Department of Homeland Security, annual reports, nothing. Then she moved to the National Archives declassified collection. After an hour, she found the first breadcrumb, a 2008 document on emergency response drills in the Pacific Northwest. Most of it was blacked out, but one line remained: joint exercise conducted under directive, Reaper origin. She clicked through. Related files. The name appeared sporadically until 2012. Then silence. No further mentions, no cancellations. Just a void, as if the program had been erased mid-sentence. Her stomach tightened. Erased didn't mean dead. The bell over the coffee shop door jingled. Claire glanced up, reflexively scanning the man who entered jeans, windbreaker, sunglasses. He bought nothing, just took a seat near the back, facing the street, but with a perfect view of her corner. She kept her eyes on her laptop screen, but her mind was suddenly loud with alarms. Sliding her phone from her pocket, she opened a secure contact list, one she kept from her years of contracting for state communications projects. She scrolled to a name she hadn't touched in 5 years: Tom Alvarez. Tom had been a radio engineer for over 3 decades, working under both public and classified contracts. He knew frequencies the public didn't, and he owed her a favor. She typed, "Need to talk." Heard something on TestFrec. Unlogged, urgent. The reply came 3 minutes later. "My place. Now." Claire packed up, dropped a 5 on the table, and walked out without looking at the man in the windbreaker. Tom lived in a single-story house on the edge of town, half hidden by overgrown orange trees. When she arrived, he was already on the porch, a mug of coffee in hand. His hair was white now, his face more lined, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "What did you hear?" he asked before she'd even reached the steps. She took out her recorder and hit play. The voice filled the air between them. "Welcome back, Reaper Origin." Tom's expression hardened. He didn't ask her to replay. Where? "Northern Sector, Tower 19, this morning." He shook his head slowly. "If you're hearing that phrase, Claire, it's not an accident. Someone inside wants you to know they're still watching." "Still?" she asked. "They never went away. Just stopped talking where people could listen. But if they've reached out again, it means they're active. And if they're active..." He stopped, glancing toward the street as if expecting company. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. "Why me?" Tom's gaze locked on hers. "Because you were always marked, whether you knew it or not." The words hit Claire like a cold wind. Always marked. She stared at Tom, searching his lined face for some hint of exaggeration, but his gaze stayed steady, unreadable. "I don't even know what that means," she said. "It means," he replied, "you've been on their ledger since you were a kid. Reaper Origin didn't recruit people, they inherited them. Family lines. Skills passed down. They trained you without telling you they were training you." Claire gave a short, humorless laugh. Tom, I work on Siren speakers. You think knowing how to read frequency bleed, troubleshoot relay interference, and patch analog overrides into digital systems is just a quirk? That's my job. He sipped his coffee, eyes not leaving hers. It's your cover. Claire shook her head, trying to push away the creeping unease. I was never in the military. I've never been part of anything like that. Doesn't matter. Your father was, and when he disappeared, Tom's voice trailed off, as if weighing whether to continue. My father died in a car accident, she said, sharper than she meant to. That's what you were told, Tom said quietly. The kitchen clock ticked loud in the pause that followed. Claire stood, pacing to the window. Outside, the overgrown orange trees swayed slightly in the breeze, their branches whispering against each other. What exactly was Reaper Origin? She asked finally. Tom set his mug down. An interagency covert response unit. Not military, not police something. In between. They operated off the books, embedded in existing infrastructure. Their mission was to monitor, and, if necessary, neutralize domestic threats that couldn't be acknowledged publicly. The Siren network was one of their tools, secure, analog hardened, and capable of broadcasting to specific operatives without anyone else knowing. And my father was one of their best field commanders. You were exposed to their codes young, probably, without realizing it. Phrases, sounds, tonal patterns. To most people, they'd mean nothing. To someone, in the program, they're activation triggers. Claire rubbed her temples. So you're saying that voice I heard was activating me? I'm saying it was contacting you, which is worse. She let out a long breath, her thoughts tangling faster than she could untangle them. If that's true, why now? Why? After all these years? Tom's gaze flicked to the front window, then back to her. Because they need you again. Or they need something only you can access. Claire opened her laptop on Tom's kitchen table, ignoring the way his eyes narrowed at the sight of it. I started digging earlier today. All I found were fragments mentions of Reaper Origin in DHS exercises until 2012. Then nothing. Tom leaned over her shoulder, his breath smelling faintly of coffee and cigarettes. That's because they went dark. Not disbanded, just silent. She clicked open another tab, pulling up the declassified files she'd bookmarked. This. One's from 2009 joint drill in Oregon. And this 2011 coastal security exercise. But after that, no trace. Not even in classified indexes I know how to access. That's because they scrubbed them. Someone high up ordered a ghosting. Why? Tom hesitated. There was rumors about an internal betrayal. An op gone sideways. People dead who weren't supposed to be. They pulled everything into the shadows. Claire's pulse quickened. And you think my father? I think your father either went down with the unit, or walked away and became a liability. The thought lodged like a stone in her chest. Before she could press him further, a faint sound broke the quiet, a low hum, almost like an engine idling. Tom's expression darkened. He stepped to the curtain and parted it just enough to peek outside. A black SUV had pulled to the curb across the street. Its windows were tinted, its engine running. Friend of yours? Claire asked. No, Tom said flatly. Stay away from the windows. He crossed to a narrow cabinet near the back door, unlocked it, and pulled out a small, battered metal case. Inside was a portable frequency scanner, its surface scuffed and its knobs worn smooth from decades of use. He flipped it on, turning the dials with quick precision. If they're watching you, they're transmitting too. Let's see what they're sitting on. The scanner crackled, hissed, then caught a faint, steady tone. A second later, a voice not the same as the one Claire had heard on the Siren spoke. Target confirmed. Hold position. Claire's skin went cold. Tom's. Jaw tightened. "They're here for you." She looked at him, her voice low. "Then we need to move." He shook his head. "No. If they wanted to take you, they would have done it already. They're waiting, which means they want you to go somewhere." Claire swallowed. "Where?" As if in answer, there was a soft thunk at the front door. Tom moved quickly, scooping it up before it could slide fully inside. It was an envelope, unmarked. He handed it to her. "Your move." Inside was a single photograph, grainy, clearly taken from a distance. It showed Claire herself, leaving the Siren Tower that very morning. On the back, written in blocky black ink, were coordinates. Tom scanned them. "That's the old Coast Guard station? Been abandoned for years." Claire stared at the numbers, the weight of the decision pressing down hard. "If I go there, I'm walking right into their hands. And if you don't," Tom said, "they'll just send someone to bring you anyway." The scanner crackled again. "Confirm package en route." Her pulse pounded in her ears. She slipped the photo back into the envelope, tucking it into her jacket. "Guess I'd rather drive myself." The sirens were silent now, the desert wind carrying only the faint hum of the speaker towers, cooling under the evening sun. Harper sat in the municipal van, hands clenched around the steering wheel, staring at the open road back to the station. She'd been in dangerous situations before: wildfires, flash floods, even a bomb threat at a county fair, but nothing like this. That voice in the siren system hadn't just been creepy. It had been impossible. "Welcome back, Reaper Origin." The words rolled in her mind like a toxic echo. She'd never heard that phrase before, at least. She didn't think she had. But it felt heavy, weighted with something from a life she didn't want to examine. She'd tried reporting it to dispatch on the drive, but the line crackled, and her radio fell silent, as if the signal had been swallowed. Cell service was no better. The last text she tried to send to her boss hung with a perpetual sending status. She kept driving, glancing in the rearview mirror every few seconds, scanning the long stretch of nothing behind her. Halfway to the station, she spotted a vehicle far back, low-slung, black, with headlights dimmed even though the sun was going down. It was keeping pace with her, maintaining the same distance no matter how much she accelerated or slowed. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just a malfunction anymore. Somebody had deliberately hijacked the siren system. Somebody who now seemed to be following her. She pulled into a gas station on the outskirts of town, keeping her eyes on the black vehicle. The driver didn't follow her into the lot. Instead, it rolled slowly past on the highway, disappearing into the growing dusk. Harper exhaled shakily and stepped out. Inside the convenience store, the air was cold, smelling faintly of freezer burn. A teenage cashier was scrolling on his phone behind the counter. Harper tried to act normal, grabbing a bottle of water, but when she went to pay, the kid looked up, froze, and frowned. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked. "Yeah. Why?" she replied, forcing a smile. "Your, badge," he pointed at her chest. She looked down her city-issued emergency management badge. But instead of reading, Harper Lane, Public, Safety, the badge screen was flickering, glitching in and out to reveal something else. For a fraction of a second, she saw black letters against a white background. Reaper Origin Active Status. She yanked it off, shoved it into her jacket pocket, and muttered something about it being broken. The cashier didn't look convinced. Back in her van, Harper hesitated before turning the ignition. Her hands were trembling now. The badge wasn't supposed to change ever. It was a simple ID with no dynamic display, no digital interface. Whatever had just happened was as impossible as that voice. Her phone buzzed suddenly in the queue folder. She grabbed it, an unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her swipe to answer. "Lane, A male voice said, calm, authoritative. You need to get off the road. Now. You're already tagged. Who is this? She demanded, gripping the steering wheel. Reaper Origin, listen to me. Stop calling me that. She snapped. There was a pause, then a quiet sigh. We don't have time for you to pretend. The fact that the siren spoke means they've already located you. If you go back to the station, you'll lead them right to everyone else. You need to go dark. No phone, no radio, no station. Harper's pulse thudded in her ears. Who are they? People who erased you once. People who thought you were gone for good. But the system reactivated you, which means you're alive. To them now. That's why the voice said what it said. She laughed nervously. This is insane. I'm just a city emergency tech. You were, the voice said, colder now. Until 10 years ago. Her throat felt dry. 10 years ago, she had been in a car accident severe enough to put her in the hospital for weeks. She'd lost huge chunks of memory from before the crash. The doctors called it traumatic amnesia. But if this man was right, maybe she hadn't just forgotten. Maybe. She had been made to forget. I'm sending coordinates, the voice said. Drive there. Don't stop for anyone. If you see that black car again, lose it before you reach the location. The line went dead. A ping sounded from her phone GPS coordinates she didn't recognize. The route pointed her away from town, deeper into the uninhabited parts of Vice. The county, where the dirt roads turned to dust and cell towers became rare. Every instinct told her to go back to the safety of the station, to people she trusted. But there was another feeling, small, sharp, and buried deep in her chest, that told her the stranger was telling the truth. She started driving, following the GPS. The sun dropped fully behind the horizon, the desert turning into a vast black sheet under a sky filled with cold stars. Every sound outside felt amplified, the crunch of gravel under her tires, the faint whistle of wind through the cracked passenger window. 20 minutes later, the headlights of the black car appeared again in her rearview mirror. This time, it wasn't keeping distance. It was closing in. The night was windless, the kind that carried every sound like a whisper in a cathedral. Morgan stood on the outskirts of the training base, boots planted on the frost-slick grass, staring at the rolling hills that hid more than they revealed. She could still feel the vibration in her chest from the siren test earlier, but now it was something else, a low, intermittent pulse. It wasn't mechanical. It felt alive. Behind her, Colonel Hayes emerged from the shadows, his voice calm, but edged with urgency. You're not supposed to be out here. Morgan didn't turn. That signal earlier, the one embedded in the siren's output, you recognized it. You didn't even deny it. Hayes exhaled slowly, stepping beside her. What I recognized was something I swore would never be used again. But the voice calling you Reaper Origin, that's a different matter. Morgan's jaw tightened. So, tell me, what is Reaper Origin? He shook his head. It's not a what. It's a who, or rather, it was. And you were it. At least, before you were erased. The words hung. Between them, thick as fog. Morgan laughed once, sharp and humorless. That's impossible. My life is boring. I grew up in Lincoln, worked dispatch, and took this job because it pays steady. You've never remembered, Hayes corrected. The mind can be rewritten. Identities can be buried. But the body remembers, especially when it hears the right frequencies. The pulse beneath the earth quickened as, though in agreement, a thin beam of light swept over the far hill. A security drone, silent and deliberate, scanned the ground. Hayes stepped closer to Morgan. That's not ours. Within seconds, a second drone appeared, its red sensor glowing like an ember. Morgan instinctively crouched, scanning for cover. If they're not yours, then whose are they? Hayes's. Voice dropped. Ghost unit. They were disbanded officially. Unofficially, they hunt assets that go rogue. And you, Morgan, were their crown jewel. Before she could respond, the drones accelerated, skimming the ground like predators. Hayes grabbed her arm. Move! They sprinted toward a derelict maintenance shed, slipping inside just as the red beam swept past the open doorway. Morgan's. Breath came in shallow bursts, her heart sinking with the subterranean pulse. Inside the shed, Hayes pried up a warped wooden floorboard, revealing a narrow metal hatch. This leads to the old conduit tunnels. They're shielded. It'll buy us time. Morgan stared at the hatch, then at him. Why are you helping me? His expression hardened. Because I was the one ordered to erase you. And I didn't do it right. The confession struck her harder than the siren blast had. Hayes swung the hatch open, revealing a ladder that vanished into darkness. A faint hum rose from below, the same frequency she'd felt earlier, deeper now, almost melodic. Morgan hesitated, then climbed down. The air grew cooler, denser. Her boots landed on concrete, the tunnel stretching into blackness, lit only by flickering sodium lights. Hayes followed, sealing the hatch above. This tunnel connects to the core of the old command. Grid, he said. If the signal you heard is coming from there, it means someone's reactivated it, and that's bad for everyone. They walked quickly, the tunnel walls echoing every step. At one bend, Morgan paused. The hum grew louder, wrapping around. Her like a familiar voice. Without thinking, she placed her hand on the wall. A shiver raced through her as fragments of memory flashed desert night. Her own voice issuing commands in a language she didn't know she knew, and a room full of people obeying without hesitation. Her knees buckled. Hayes caught her. Easy. You're accessing muscle memory. It's not just training, it's encoded in you. Morgan pushed away from him. Encoded for what? He met her gaze. For control. The word unsettled her. More than it should have. Far ahead, the tunnel widened into a chamber lined with rusted panels and obsolete monitors. But at the center stood something out of place, a sleek, black console humming with power, its surface glowing faintly with the same pattern she'd seen in her brief memory flash. Morgan approached, the glow intensifying. Morgan, Haas, began, but she ignored him, placing her palm on the surface. Instantly, the console responded, lights blooming in concentric circles, and the hum deepened into a steady, commanding tone. A voice emerged from the air itself. Reaper origin. Command authority restored. Awaiting directives. Hayes swore under his breath. Morgan's vision swam, memories slamming into her missions completed in shadows. A codename whispered. Across borders, her voice triggering sirens that weren't warnings, but orders. She staggered back, clutching her head. I don't want this. The voice was patient, mechanical, yet unnervingly personal. You were made for this. You cannot be unmade. From somewhere above, a metallic crash echoed through the tunnel. The drones had found the hatch. Hayes grabbed her shoulder. We have minutes at best. If you issue a command now, you could shut them out, or you could call the rest of the network online. Morgan stared at the console, her reflection fractured in its black surface. Every instinct screamed to run, but another part of her, deeper, older part ached to speak the words she didn't yet fully remember. The pulse beneath the ground merged with the pounding in her chest, indistinguishable now. Above, the sound of cutting torches began. The drones were forcing their way in. Hayes' voice was urgent. Decide, Morgan. Before they decide for you. She opened her mouth, and the hum surged, swallowing the moment in a wave of sound. The rain hammered the rooftop like a war drone, as Addison braced herself against the whipping wind. The siren tower above her groaned under the storm's force, its skeletal frame shuddering with every gust. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her orders from emergency services were simple: test the siren system after repairs and log the results. But now, everything was different. The voice, deep, resonant, and unmistakably human, had spoken through. The siren earlier. "Welcome back, Reaper Origin." She hadn't told anyone. Not Jacob, not Director Hensley, not even her brother. The words didn't feel like a glitch in the system. They felt like they were meant for her. Her headset crackled to life, but instead of static or Jacob's voice, she heard a faint, rhythmic pulse. Thump dot 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 thump dot 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 thump. She recognized it instantly. Morse code. Her military training was rusty, but not that rusty. REC to IVTED. Addison's breath hitched. She scanned the stormy skyline, her flashlight beam cutting through sheets of rain. "Who is this?" She called into the mic, knowing full well the siren wasn't transmitting. The reply came in the same heartbeat-like cadence. "To I may ice. Unote EYO yours." She gritted her teeth. Whoever this was had access to a system so buried in government infrastructure, it was practically a ghost. The siren grid wasn't just for weather alerts. It was tied into old Cold War-era defense protocols. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the figure of a man standing on a nearby rooftop, too still, too deliberate to be random. Before she could shout, the figure vanished into the storm. Her phone buzzed violently. Unknown number. Against her. "Better judgment," she answered. "Addison Vale," the voice said smoothly. "You're awake again. Good. That means the others will wake soon, too." Her heart pounded. "Who are you?" "You don't remember." "That's fine. You will." The line clicked dead. She bolted for the access ladder, descending 2 rungs at a time, boots slipping on slick metal. If this was tied to what happened in 2014, those missing months she never could explain, then she wasn't just in danger. Everyone in her city could be. Back in her truck, she powered the siren down from her console, but the readout didn't change. The system was still love broadcasting something she couldn't hear. She flipped open the emergency maintenance panel and froze. Someone had spliced an extra cable into the network, thin, black, and humming faintly. Not standard issue. Not even modern. When she touched it, the hum vibrated up her arm like an electrical heartbeat. In her mind, clear as if someone whispered directly into her ear, came the words, "We are not done, Origin." Her vision flickered, replaced for a second by a memory that wasn't supposed to exist. A desert at night. A black operations team moving in formation, her own hands holding a rifle. A voice in her earpiece, then just like now calling her Reaper. She stumbled back, ripping her hand away from the wire. Her breathing was ragged, the truck's cabin suddenly claustrophobic. Jacob's voice finally cut through the coms. "Addison! Are you okay? We lost your signal for 5 minutes." "5 minutes?" she whispered. It had felt like seconds. "We need you back at HQ, Jacob said, his voice tight. "Director Hensley says the feds just called. They're invoking a protocol I've never even heard of, Shadow Siren." Her grip tightened on the wheel. Shadow Siren. That phrase triggered another flash of memory. A hidden base. Rows of massive speakers pointed skyward, and the knowledge that whatever they were built for had nothing to do with tornado warnings. As she sped toward HQ, the storm seemed to follow her unnaturally fast, the clouds swirling in a spiral that mirrored the siren's signal pattern. When she pulled into the lot, 3 black SUVs were parked outside. Men in unmarked tactical gear stood watch, their faces unreadable under the glare of the security lights. One of them locked eyes with her and murmured something into his earpiece. Inside, the HQ felt transformed. The usual hum of radios and chatter was gone, replaced by a cold, focused silence. Director Hensley stood by the operations map, flanked by two agents in dark suits. "Vale," Hensley said, not unkindly. "They tell me you've been contacted." Addison kept her voice even. The Siren's been hijacked. Morse code messages, strange cabling spliced into the system. And voices. The taller agent stepped forward. "Voices?" "Singular," Addison corrected. "A man knows my name. Calls me Reaper Origin." The agent's jaw tightened. "And it's worse than we thought." Hensley gestured to the map. Every Siren tower in the city was marked with a red pin. At 0200 hours, all units broadcast the same encrypted pulse. We didn't trigger it. Neither did the state. That leaves only one explanation. Addison swallowed hard. Someone who still has access to the old network. The shorter agent glanced at her, eyes sharp. "And you were part of that network once, weren't you?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. The taller agent slid a folder across the table. Inside was a photograph, grainy, night vision green. A squad of operatives in desert camouflage. One of them center frame was unmistakably her, though the picture was dated March 2014. Addison stared at it, her pulse thundering in her ears. She had no memory of that night. "We're not here to accuse you," the agent said. "We're here to warn you. If they're calling you back, it's because whatever you helped bury is trying to surface. And if it does, this city won't survive it." Lightning flashed outside. For the first time, Addison realized the Siren towers weren't sounding for the storm. They were sending a message. And she was the only one who could understand it. Snow came down in a slow, silent curtain, muting the world into shades of gray. Riley stood at the edge of Lake Grayford, the frozen surface stretching out like a sheet of polished steel. The wind clawed at her hood, carrying with it the faint, metallic tang of something unnatural. 2 hours earlier, the voice on the Siren system had returned for the first time in days. "Reaper Origin, retrieve the key under the ice. Time is limited. No instructions. No coordinates." But she had known instantly where to go. Lake Grayford was where it had all begun, at least, according to the fragmentary memories that had started bleeding through the walls of her mind. Lucas stood beside her, shivering, shotgun slung over his shoulder. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," Riley said flatly, her eyes fixed on the center of the lake. "But we don't have another choice." The lake's surface groaned under their boots as they stepped onto it, cracks spider webbing under the thin powder of snow. She moved carefully, listening for the sound of shifting ice. The Sirens in town had been silent since that last broadcast, but she had the knowing feeling something was listening, tracking her every step. About 50 yards from shore, she stopped. The memories returned in sharp flashes, her hands gloved and slick with water, shoving something metallic into a black case. A voice, deep and urgent, telling her she'd never see daylight again if it fell into the wrong hands. She clenched her fists, shaking the image away. "Here," she said, dropping to her knees. Lucas unslung the pack from his shoulder and pulled out the ice auger they'd borrowed from a baffled fisherman on the outskirts of town. The grind of the blades chewing through the frozen surface echoed into the silence. By the time they broke through, a dark, frigid hole yawned beneath them. Riley reached in without hesitation. The water was agony liquid knives slicing through muscle and bone, but her fingers brushed something solid. She hauled it up, a small black case, sealed, with a lock that had no keyhole, only a tiny biometric scanner. It pulsed faintly blue when her thumb brushed it. The lock clicked open. Inside, nestled in foam, was an old-fashioned brass key. Lucas stared. "That's it? We risk hypothermia for a house key?" Riley shook her head. She could feel it, an energy humming from the object, the way the brass seemed warmer than the surrounding air. "It's not a house key," she murmured. "It's a trigger." The air changed. A low rumble vibrated under the ice, traveling up her knees, her spine. Lucas looked around wildly. Riley? From the far shore, black shapes began to emerge from the trees, dozens of them, moving in perfect synchronization. Tall, too. Tall to be human, with glowing blue slits where their eyes should have been. Their movements were mechanical, precise, deliberate. The sirens in the town erupted again, wailing not their usual test tone, but a low, rising frequency that set Riley's teeth on edge. Over the noise, the voice returned, calm and chilling. Reaper origin. Extraction is compromised. Defend the key at all costs. The shapes broke into a run. The ice cracked under the force of their steps, but they didn't slow down. Lucas pumped the shotgun, backing up toward shore. Tell me you have a plan. Riley didn't answer. She stuffed the key into her jacket and reached for the sidearm holstered at her hip. The first figure reached the edge of the hole. She fired twice center mass, but the rounds barely staggered it. Headshots, she shouted. Lucas adjusted his aim, and the second shot punched clean through the glowing slit of the lead figure's face, dropping it in an explosion of sparks. They fell back step by step, the ice splintering beneath them. Riley could feel the vibrations, growing stronger beneath her feet, as if something massive moved under the surface. Then, without warning, the ice caved in a dozen yards behind the advancing machines, swallowing two of them whole. But it wasn't the lake that had taken them. It was something beneath it. A dark shape the size of a bus moved under the water. Fast and deliberate. Move! Riley yelled, shoving Lucas toward the shore. The key in her pocket felt like it was burning against her skin now, and she knew without understanding how that whatever was under the ice was connected to it. They reached the shore just as the last line of ice gave way behind them. The mechanical figures still standing retreated in perfect unison, vanishing back into the tree line without a word or sound. Lucas bent over, panting, his breath clouding. The air, they just stopped. Why would they? A deep, distorted voice cut him off. It didn't come from the sirens this time. It came from the key. Reaper origin, the lock is breaking. The door will open soon. You must choose which side. You're on. Riley froze, the weight of the brass key suddenly unbearable in her hand. She realized the choice wasn't about keeping it safe. It was about whether to use it. And somewhere deep in her bones, she already knew that turning it would change everything. The wind had died to a whisper as Riley stood at the edge of the clearing, the brass key heavy in her palm. The snow beneath her boots had soft as slush, each step leaving a dark imprint that seemed to absorb the cold. Around her, the abandoned. Structures of the old Coast Guard station creaked like ghosts, their windows shattered and walls scarred by decades of neglect. She wasn't alone. Behind her, Lucas and a small team of resistance fighters had gathered people who had long suspected that the Siren system was more than an emergency alert network. People who had fought in the shadows to keep the city safe from something they didn't fully understand. But tonight, everything was coming to light. The sky flickered with unnatural light as the siren towers around the city sparked to life, sending an electronic pulse that made the ground tremble beneath their feet. It wasn't a warning this time, it was a call. Riley's breath hitched. As the voice returned, clearer and more insistent than ever. Reaper origin, it is time to awaken the network. The legacy you carry cannot be denied. Her fingers tightened around the key. Memories surged like a tidal wave years she didn't remember. Missions that had shaped the country's hidden defense and the cost she had paid to forget. Is this what you want? Lucas asked quietly, stepping beside her. To turn the key? To bring all of this back? Riley looked at the faces around her, determined, weary, ready. The choice wasn't just hers anymore. "If I don't," she said, "they win. They use the silence as a weapon. The city dies in the dark." The key pulsed, a faint warmth spreading through her palm, guiding her to the heavy steel door of the underground bunker. She fitted the key into the ancient lock. It clicked. The door groaned open, revealing a stairwell spiraling into darkness. The pulse from the sirens grew stronger, almost like a heartbeat syncing with her own. As she descended, the memories returned, fully her training, her code name, the reasons why the sirens were built, not just for weather, but for command and control of the nation's most secret defense systems. Inside the control room, rows of consoles flickered to life as she passed. She approached the central terminal, hands trembling but resolute. "Welcome back, Reaper Origin." A synthesized voice greeted her as she touched the screen. "Activate network," she whispered. The siren's wails turned to a steady signal, a beacon of readiness, a promise that the city was no longer vulnerable. The pulse beneath the ground steadied, the threat held at bay for now. Outside, the storm clouds parted, revealing the stars. Riley exhaled, knowing the fight was far from over, but for the first time in years, she had reclaimed her place. The network was awake, and so was she. Riley stood before the heavy steel door of the underground bunker, the brass key warm and vibrating in her palm like a living thing. Outside, the city's siren towers hummed in unison, their usual warning wail replaced by a steady, almost hypnotic pulse that thrummed through the ground beneath her boots. Around her, the teen from the resistance shifted nervously, eyes flicking between the ancient lock and the growing energy in the air. Lucas tightened his grip on his shotgun, his jaw clenched but trusting her decision. "This is it," Riley said quietly. "Once I turn this key, there's no going back." She slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly, the mechanism clicking open with a sound that echoed deep into the cold silence of the night. The door groaned as it swung inward, revealing a descending stairwell, cloaked in shadow and thick with the scent of old metal and forgotten memories. With a deep breath, Riley began her descent. The walls around her flickered to life as she passed rows of monitors and control panels, lighting up one by one, bathing the corridor in a ghostly blue glow. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached the bottom and stepped into the main control room. This place was the heart of Reaper Origin, a command center that had once directed covert operations across the country, buried beneath layers of classified protocols and erased histories. The room was alive with a soft hum of machinery, the pulse syncing perfectly with the sirens above. A synthesized voice greeted her, calm and familiar. "Welcome back, Reaper Origin." Command authority restored. Her breath caught. The weight of years lost and missions forgotten settled over her like a shroud. Memories flooded back night. Operations in desert heat, codes whispered in half-forgotten languages, the faces of comrades lost in silence. Her hand hovered over the central console, heart pounding in rhythm with the siren's pulse. She knew what this meant. Activating the network would bring the system back online, reawakening defenses that had lain dormant for years, but also revealing her true identity to those still hunting her. She glanced at Lucas and the others, their faces set with determination. They were counting on her. With steady resolve, she pressed the activation command. The monitors flared, displaying grids of cities, signals, and encrypted data streams. The sirens outside shifted, broadcasting a new message, one of readiness, protection, and vigilance. But the moment wasn't without cost. The bunker's communication lines lit up with incoming messages, encrypted warnings, coded threats, and ghost transmissions from operatives long believed gone. The shadowy forces who tried to erase Reaper Origin were mobilizing, their presence like a cold shadow creeping closer. Riley's mind raced. She was no longer just a technician or an emergency responder. She was the keyholder to a legacy of hidden battles fought in silence, battles that had shaped the fate of her city and perhaps the nation. As she monitored the network, a familiar voice crackled through the console speakers, not mechanical, but human, urgent. Origin, this is Director Hayes. They're coming. We don't have much time. Her pulse quickened. The fight was just beginning. Outside, the resistance fighters readied themselves, weapons clicking and radios whispering final checks. The city was holding its breath beneath the now steady pulse of the siren's alert, but unaware of the storm gathering on its doorstep. Riley stepped away from the console and looked at her team. We fight not just to survive, but to protect everyone out there. This network is our last line, Lucas nodded, and we trust you to lead us through. A flash of lightning illuminated the bunker's narrow entrance as the first sounds of approaching vehicles echoed in the distance. The shadows were coming fast and relentless, but so was she. Riley took one last breath, feeling the pulse of the network thrumming beneath her skin. The legacy of Reaper Origin wasn't just a burden. It was her weapon. The last broadcast had begun.